Just a couple of days ago, Israel recognized the Armenian Genocide as legitimate. There was a unanimous vote in the Israeli cabinet, which is the senior members of Israeli Knesset, Israeli parliament, and the vote basically said we should recognize the Armenian Genocide, and the framing was that it was the duty of the Jewish state to do so. It's moral, it's the truth. Sir, I've got another one from 2023. Not that one, not that one, not that G-side. You crazy? That doesn't help our geopolitics. Leave that one to the side. Put that away, actually. Put that away. What are you even reading about that? Don't let me or anyone else see you reading that. If I even hear you utter the word Hannibal, I will personally confiscate your credit and victim cards, and you'll be grounded for 2 weeks. Don't mess about, Shlomo. Put that away and get lost. As I was saying, we recognize the Armenian Genocide. What Turkey did, so tragic, makes my crocodiles tear up. I mean, my eyes. Gideon Sa'ar proposed the motion, the Israeli cabinet, the senior members approved it, and now it goes to the Knesset for a full vote. Sa'ar said it's a historic and moral duty of the Israeli state. And so it's now pending approval to become official state policy. Naturally, Turkey came out and expressed outrage. They said weaponization of history for political motives is happening here, and we are not liking it. Because for context, the claim is that Armenians had atrocities committed against them by Turkey back in 1915, technically by the Ottoman Empire. Turkey didn't exist until 1924-25. So Turkey says the loss of life was wartime casualties, result of regional turmoil. I won't get into the Turkish perspective versus the other perspectives. Now, the point is, they're saying you're just recognizing it now after 75 years as a political tool, which is not surprising that Turkey would make that claim and that Israel would actually do that. Turkey has always denied the labeling of what happened in Armenia as a genocide. But more important is what the two other critical nations in the region responded with. Armenia itself. The Armenian Genocide, right? Armenia, the country. You'd think they'll be thrilled. Another country saw their point of view and started recognizing that 1915 event the way you recognize that event. But Armenia's like, bruv, what do you think we are, Somaliland? Nah, right? Israel's recognition of the Armenian Genocide, we oppose. We Armenians oppose the weaponization of our history in that manner. The Armenian government said we won't officially respond to the Israeli recognition, celebrating or thanking them or anything like that, because we don't want our history to be used to mess with our current relationships and be used as tools by foreigners to cause instability or for their own objectives and realignment. That's basically the Armenian position. Damn, that's crazy. And the nation most closely aligned with Israel from the region, Azerbaijan, who sell a lot of gas to Israel, they too came out and said, yeah, no, we don't agree with the weaponization of the 1915 event as it relates to Armenia either. What? Israel, ladies and gentlemen, has achieved a lot in its short lifespan, many could argue. But I have to admit, I was particularly impressed with this one. They made one declaration, and somehow Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Armenia all ended up on the same side, hand in hand. What a unifier. That kind of unifying power, guys. Not most nations. Most nations don't have that kind of skill. That's Desert Bloom level skill. I was promised 3K years ago this kind of unifying power skill. Damn. That's the news anyway. Got a bit too excited there. Sorry about that. Now here's the analysis. With fewer jokes. The shifting, and some people are like, Baba, what? Why? I don't want fewer jokes. No. Hang on. We need to understand what's going on now, not just crack jokes. It's education and it's entertainment, right? Here's the analysis. The shifting geopolitics of the region and the world bring with it the promise of opportunity, yes, but also danger. For the Caucasus region, where Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan sit, Geopolitics is not often talked about for this region specifically. I've touched on it a few times over the last couple of years, but generally, even myself, I don't really talk about it. But if we look at it now and we zoom out from the region, these three Caucasus nations are caught in a potentially very uncomfortable situation, and potentially a very profitable, fruitful situation, but they'll have to navigate the situation carefully, and there might be a lot of factors that are out of their hands, because when you're small fry, if big fries start doing certain things, you have to really adapt. You can't really change the big fries moves, can you? Because you're small fry. So these three countries, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia, they sit with Russia to their north, Iran to their east, and Turkey to their west. Brother, if stuck between a rock and a hard place was ever a term. Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia. These three will have to navigate carefully the current situation and the developments, lest they be swept up in the geopolitical hurricane or typhoon. Today's news of the Israeli recognition of the Armenian events of 1915. I'm using very neutral terminology, of course. I acknowledge that. I'm not taking a side or clarifying here, though I would... I'm not taking a side or clarifying here the details of the event, because that is not relevant. Opening up that conversation now actually steers perfectly into what Israel is looking for. So I'm not going to do that right now. The events of 1915 as it relates to Armenia. Last couple of days, Israeli recognition of it. It shows something very important is happening, which is the countries, Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. These countries are looking for stability. They're looking for cooperation between each other. None of these countries have particularly militaristic, expansionist objectives. And especially, neither Armenia nor Azerbaijan wants to get on Turkey's bad side when Turkey is fast developing their own domestic capabilities at a speed and with a quality that even has Western European powers like the UK, France, and Germany lining up to talk to Turks about defense and cooperation. NATO's next meeting is in a week's time from the time of this recording, and it's held where? Where? Ankara. Coincidence? I think not. That was the Incredibles reference to that teacher that thinks he spotted Dash moving from his seat. Anyway, sorry. You don't align yourself, geopolitically speaking, with a sinking regional power, Israel, just to oppose yourself to a closer neighbor that's a rising regional power, Turkey. It just doesn't make geopolitical sense. So Israel coming out and trying to use its own state-approved framing of reality, what I call a state's grand narrative, to try and weaponize that to cause conflict here, to potentially give other nations a reason to oppose Turkey, which obviously Israel hopes will benefit it because it opposes Turkey. It's trying to find new allies. Greece is like, bro, I really don't like the Turks, but I'm not going to be I'm not going to let you wield me as a stick against the Turks. That's not going to help me. Plus, I'm in NATO and Turkey is in NATO. What the flip are you doing in this conversation? But there's a lot of, Israel's trying. They're trying very hard. You have to give them credit, honestly. They're all up in the Serbs' grill. They're in Cyprus. They're in Greece. They're in Azerbaijan. They're in Somalia/Somaliland. They're in India. They're in India, brother. Enjoying that chicken tikka masala. Crazy, bruv. What the hard workers, bro? The hard workers, credit, give them what credit's due, bro. It's clear that these nations are resisting the Israeli attempts to frustrate the current relationships between countries and the current stabilized situation, generally speaking, between Armenia and Azerbaijan and Turkey. They're trying it. The Israelis are trying it. And these countries are trying as well. They're pushing back and saying, no, we'd rather keep the region stabilized and not start up these fires. Now, geopolitically speaking, if Armenia or Azerbaijan wanted to activate history and use that as a pretext for conflict, that is very common for countries to do. They'll pick a time in history which aligns with their current objectives. They'll activate it. They'll say, this part of history, 1915, I choose you. And they'll throw it. And 1915 comes out as an Armenian something. And then they get outraged and they say, we're going to have to oppose Turkey now because of this. I just remembered that this happened in 1915. Or they can leave the parts of history that are problematic, that are contentious, they may rightly be contentious, but they'll leave that in favor of benefits now. Because if you're like, oh, I need justice for this time, brother, get in line. How many things are there to address, to be addressed? How many miscarriages of justice? How much injustice have you seen? You think all of that is going to be addressed? Where do you start? What do you begin with? And these governments are saying, well, I'll tell you where we don't begin with 1915 and mess up what we currently have for what happened then, and not even mess it up on principle, mess it up so we can be that country's useful idiot. No thanks. La, I ain't having that. I'm getting a bit too flamboyant these days, I need to calm down. Activated outrage, what I'm trying to say is activated history and activated outrage can be diplomatically very useful, but only if it aligns with what the state is currently looking to do. So this is how you see, this is how you level up your thinking. So if you see states suddenly start talking about this history, that history, be like, are you using that as activated history for a certain geopolitical objective of yours now? Because, like, imagine Mexico was suddenly like, when the 13 colonies that became America, when they started heading west and they started taking all kinds of land from Mexico. If you look at the history of Mexico, Mexico was much bigger before America basically took over a lot of their territory. The Mexicans could be like, bro, I don't agree with that. Anyone speaking Spanish, now I'm going to administer those territories, please. America's going to be like, flipping, you crazy? How did you suddenly remember that? And Mexico might be like, oh, because, China's doing really well. And they might be able to help me get some territory back. You get me? I'm not saying this is legitimate. I'm not saying this is likely, by the way. I'm just saying nations can activate certain parts of their history. They have been known to do this a lot of the time. And they'll freeze or hide under the carpet inconvenient parts of their history if it doesn't align with their current geopolitical objectives. So when you see on the news, or when you see in announcements, nations suddenly start talking about certain things, you'll be like, NewsBaba told me about this. Let me see what they're actually trying to do. Let me see what their intentions are, what their niyat is. Niyat is intention in Arabic. I don't know. Anyway. In this case, none of the three countries, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, want to be arguing with each other, to be fighting with each other, certainly over something that happened in 1915 to the benefit of Israel now. They don't want it. And so the Israeli announcement has suffered such a resounding rejection, even from Armenia. Oh, what a fail. They've suffered such a resounding rejection, right, that... Not that anything, actually. It's one take, so I'll tell you where I sort of fizzled out a sentence, my bad. Israel suffered a resounding rejection, is what I'm trying to say. You'd think that recognizing atrocities or horrific events, the way Israel just did, you'd think Armenia, of all countries, would have jumped on that recognition, but they said, no thanks. We ain't going to do that. We're not going to let you activate our history or, pour fuel on the fire of certain divisions for your benefit. I might get some benefit in terms of, if it would benefit my geopolitical strategy, but it doesn't. So I'm all right. Thanks, man. Thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to tie my ambitions and align myself with nations that are likely to benefit my state's objectives and my people. And the, RMS Titanic, after it's hit an iceberg, is not exactly my idea of a nation I want to buy a first-class ticket to now. No thanks. Thanks, but no thanks, says Armenia. And definitely says Turkey and Azerbaijan. They're like, we ain't having any of it. You keep screaming and shouting, bro. That's where it currently stands. Good try, though. And Israel, in some ways, unified the peoples in some way. Well, the unbiased news and analysis without the Western spin, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Mahfouz Talukder, aka NewsBaba. And I'll see you on the next one.